Okay, we can just start to settle down now, so you can close your eyes. I have a little bit under 20 minutes of gist of a body scan. So we're just allowing the mind to slow now. We've probably all had busy days, and the mind will just move at a pace that day has gone. So just initially allowing everything to slow down. You can just bring your awareness down into the lower half of the body, particularly where it connects with the floor and the cushion. Come on in, yeah, you can join up here. Just aware of the sensations of the legs. Particularly aware of any tension and just letting go of any tension. And gripping or tension can be hard to let go of, but you can almost just imagine the area relaxing, and sometimes that'll do it. And we can bring our awareness to any emotional sensation we might feel in the body. So the body is often the gateway into our mood, and our emotions embody themselves physically. So you can take an interest in the area around the heart, the chest, the solar plexus, and the gut. Just see if there's any emotional sensation there. Anger has a way of embodying itself, as does excitement or anxiety or joy. And if there's anything there that's uncomfortable, you can just relax into it. Just let it be there. You can also scan the body for any pleasure that might be there. So any pleasant sensation, it might be very subtle, it might just be a touch of clothes on skin or a sense of stillness. Just taking a few moments and tuning into that. Pleasure, and especially subtle pleasure, a tendency to grow when you rest your awareness on it. So just noticing if that happens. And pleasure can have a tendency to dissolve any gripping or tension. So just noticing if there's anywhere in the body, up around the shoulders or the face, or the gut where you're gripping, and just imagine the pleasure spreading to those areas. And seeing if that relaxes anything at all. You can bring your awareness onto the breath. Just relaxing any effort you're making now in the meditation. Just sitting for a moment, absorbing the fruits of the practice. Okay, so a warm welcome. My name is Amalayodhin, and I'm going to take us through this evening, and I'm going to take us through the second of our series on the intensifiers. So some of you will have been here for the previous two evenings, and in those we did a little bit of an introduction to the intensifiers, and then last week what we did is we did the first of the intensifiers, which is emotional engagement. So what hopefully was explained last week a little bit more was that the intensifiers are basically a series of progressive steps into more and more concentrated states. So they're a way of sort of mapping your experience to see as to where it is you need to go next, as to go deeper into meditation. I was saying a couple of weeks ago that often it can feel like when we start to meditate that it's completely random as to whether we get concentrated or not. It's like just down to the meditation gods. If they favour us that particular morning, they will make us concentrated in all their beneficence. If they do not favour us, if we have not pleased them in the last 24 hours, they will not make us concentrated. So that's how it can feel, but it's not like that. It's or it's not entirely like that, shall we say. It's mostly down to whether these factors of the intensifiers are there. And we can look to the intensifiers at any moment in our experience to see where do we go next to make this a deeper meditation. So the first of those is emotional engagement. And basically what that is that the emotions, which you could say is the far largest part of us, the majority of us in terms of what we're interested in, where we tend to go, how we behave, all of those things, the bit that actually gets us kind of acting and motivated. The emotions are involved in the meditation. They actually want to meditate. They're sort of interested in the meditation. And we know, don't we, that if we're not actually emotionally engaged with something, it's almost impossible to engage. You get it, don't you, if you have a conversation with a friend and like you go around the houses on things that they're interested in but you're not interested in, and you're interested in but they're not interested in, and the two of you are sat there sort of bored until you hit on something that you're both emotionally engaged in. Might be the football, might be chess, might be whatever it is, Wordle. might be whatever it is. And then the two of you hit on it, and all of a sudden the conversation just lifts, doesn't it? There's sort of energy in the conversation, and there's a kind of, the two of you kind of sat up. But until that point, you sort of have to go around polite small talk until the two of you kind of figure out a place that you both want to talk about. Sometimes you never get there, and then you're bored for an hour and a half, whatever it might be. You make your excuses and you go on. But emotional engagement is very important that way, isn't it? Anything that we get involved in deeply, we have to be emotionally engaged in. So that's the first step of the intensifiers, is that you're emotionally engaged with something. Now, what that arises into is the second stage of the intensifiers, which is commitment. You could say commitment is almost the decision to stay with something, or the decision to engage with something. Maybe it's the more sort of conscious bit. Now, what's often said is that you can think of this like as it arises quite naturally out of the previous step. So with all of the intensifiers, it's not like it goes emotional engagement and then you leave that behind, and then you do commitment and then you leave that behind, and then you do remembering and then you leave that behind. It's like what happens is that emotional commitments get so full that you could think of it as sort of pouring out or spilling out into commitment. And then when your commitment gets so full, it pours out or spills out into the next stage. So you could almost think of it like, like one of those Roman fountains at the very top. You've got a sort of bowl, and when that fills with water, it goes down into the second bowl. So the second bowl in the intensifiers, you could say, is an extension of emotional engagement, and that's commitment, the decision to actually stay with something. So we kind of know what that feels like, don't we? When you're really emotionally engaged with something, like when you're really emotionally convinced of the worthwhileness of something, you make a decision to stick with it. And you know what that feels like, don't you? It's like, when you make a sort of a decision and then you make a decision. When you make a sort of, oh yeah, I'll do that because it's good for me, but your heart's not in it, and you're not going to do it, really. And then you make a decision where it feels like, oh yes, this is a decision because my heart and my emotions are actually behind it. There's an actual sort of feeling to that, to both decisions, isn't there? The decision that's not really a decision, which is a sort of head decision, you could say, because it's good for me, because I have to do it, or whatever it might be, feels sort of superficial and empty, and likely that you possibly won't do it when it actually comes down to the crunch. The emotional decision comes with like energy, doesn't it? It comes with like, and I'm definitely going to do that. Really, we need our emotions involved in anything, and if we're actually going to make a decision on it. It's like, say, for example, if you, take, for example, you have this you might have an addiction or something like that. That's really not very good for you. Some people, obviously, addiction, is really very, very bad for you. Say, for example, you have an alcohol problem. It can take a big shock to the emotions, can't it, to get you actually to decide to change. Your wife might leave you, your husband might leave you, you might lose your job, all your teeth might fall, you might go to the dentist says you've got to lose all the teeth, they're all gone. Whatever it might be, it's the emotions need a shock to actually get you to go in that situation, to go, okay, no, actually I'm going to make a decision now to change. Similarly, for example, if you wanted to become vegetarian, but you kind of kept on falling off the bandwagon, you might have a shock one day. You might look at a documentary, for example, and you might see the conditions of abattoirs or something like that. And it's the emotions that make the decision. So you get a certain emotional engagement with something, and then that spills over into a real decision on it. You could kind of think of this like a vow. Bhante Sangharakshita, the man who founded this particular movement, he used to say that when you make a vow, it's already good as done. Actually, the thing that you vow to do is done. There's absolutely no question of it not being done. Now, if you take a vow and you don't do it, he'd say, you never took the vow in the first place. It's a very, very serious thing to break a vow in Buddhist tradition. If you make a vow to do something and you break it, really, really significant. But if you make a vow in the true sense, in the sense of an emotional decision, you could think of a vow as an emotional decision. It's already good as done. And then you just need to actually go about the process of doing it. So we know that feeling, don't we? When we've made a decision where it's like, that's a decision. We then just have to go through the motions to do it, irrespective of how hard that is. And oftentimes we make decisions because we've been so emotionally convinced by something, when it's very, very difficult to follow through, and we still follow through because we've sort of right at our gut level, we've been convinced of the rightness of something like that. So yeah, decisions are very, very important things to do. I was talking with a friend a little while ago, and this probably come off as a bit of a controversial opinion, but we were saying that the difference between me, say, or most of us, and successful people, really, really successful people, be it successful in business or sport or whatever sort of field of life that you're successful in, really the only difference between them and most of the rest of us, me included, is they actually take a decision. They just take decisions in their lives and then they follow through and they just do stuff. They don't trip themselves up. Like I decide to do something and I trip myself up. Like a day later, I couldn't possibly do it. All these things could go wrong. I just put stuff in front of my way that would mean I don't really have to sort of follow through. I think actually the difference between most people and successful people is that successful people just do stuff. Now that's not to say there aren't advantages in life and things like that, but often people who are very successful come from nothing, and they still manage to get to where they're going. And I think it's just because they make decisions. I was reading recently, I've been reading a history of the Jewish people, and they've been talking particularly about the first wave of Jewish generations coming from Russia, coming from the pogroms in Russia, where they faced huge levels of discrimination and poverty, and came to the States sort of in the 19th century with nothing, absolutely broke. And you just get these amazing stories of like first generation Jewish kids, like starting in, say, for example, a movie theatre where they just run film to and from. Then by 16 they're managing the place, 18 they've got their first movie theatre, 20 they've got 20 movie theatres, 22 they've got a movie production company. Phenomenal, and it just, I think it just came from the ability to decide and to follow through. So when we make a decision, it's like we've got the conviction behind that particular decision. And what we want to do is we want to start to get a feeling of that in meditation. So easy to just sit down and meditate on autopilot. Just to go, sit down and meditate every morning because that's what I do at 8 o'clock in the morning or 7 o'clock in the morning, whatever it might be. And we never really make the decision to actually meditate. We never decide, okay, now what I'm going to do is to meditate. Now that's probably because we haven't got our emotions in behind it. We've just sort of gone on autopilot, sat down and decided, okay, hopefully it'll just happen. Or just fingers and toes crossed, hopefully it'll just happen. But it's much, much better to actually start to cultivate a sense of conviction in the meditation. So what you want to do is actually get to a point where you feel like you get something of the flavour of that energy behind a real decision, like you'd make if you say, for example, you really knew you decided to do something. So what that will probably mean is developing a little bit of emotional engagement at first. So you could bring to mind, for example, why it is you meditate, what it is that you're looking to cultivate. You might bring to mind, for example, somebody that inspires you in that regard, somebody that you'd like to be like, who's more loving than you or more generous or more patient or whatever it might be, and you just bring them to mind, or you'd bring to mind what brought you first into the London Buddhist Centre here. And you might just dwell with that for a moment, just let that sort of sink in. And then on the basis of that, you'd make a decision to engage. And the decision to engage would be, okay, I know why I'm doing this. let's actually commit to giving an appropriate level of effort in over the next 20 minutes or hour, however long that you're doing it. Yeah. Now that won't be, okay, I'm deciding to get concentrated. That's not how it works. You can't decide to get concentrated. All that you can do is decide to make an appropriate level of effort, which won't be an all-out 100% all-in effort. That's not going to work either. And it won't be no effort either. It'll be an appropriate, a mature level of effort, you could say. And that's the decision that you're sort of looking to make. So you're looking to cultivate a sense of sort of commitment to the meditation in that moment. But that commitment will have to come out of an emotional engagement. So you'll need to bring to mind something of, well, why we're doing this. Why sit down and meditate? You could bring to mind an image of the Buddha, or somebody that inspires you, or the reason that you walked in here in the first place, whatever it might, whatever works for you. Something that sort of turns you on, to use a phrase. Yeah. So, and then you're making a decision on that basis. Okay, and now I'm going to work maturely with that. So that's what we'll try for the next 20 minutes or so. We'll do a mindfulness of breathing, and we're just going to put that in place and see how we get on. So why don't we set up for meditation? Again, just going back to physical awareness, awareness of the body. So in this first stage, we're just going to start to develop sense of emotional engagement with the meditation. So you can maybe just bring to mind one of those things we were talking about, the Buddha, or somebody that inspires you, or somebody that you look up to. Or maybe you might even have an example recently of somebody acting courageously or kindly. You just bring that to mind. You can keep an awareness of the heart area as we do that. It's often where we'll feel emotional engagement. the basis of that engagement, we can just look to see, can we develop a level of commitment to engaging with the meditation now. It doesn't mean we're going all out for concentration, it just means a mature level of engagement. We can just, if we get distracted, come back to that emotional engagement again and recommit ourselves to the practice. Mindfulness of breathing. on to the second stage now. If you're getting distracted, just see, can you come back to an emotional engagement and a renewed commitment out of that? Moving on to the third stage now. And just breathing normally. Moving on to the fourth stage. And then just relaxing any effort you're making in the meditation now. Just sitting.